Hello and welcome to Learn to Listen. I have one of my closest friends joining us today. Sam, I am so happy you're here. We're going to dive into it. I'm going to give a little bit of our background and then Sam, you can introduce ourselves. But Sam and I met through the women's team at the University of Notre Dame. That's the rowing team. I've talked about it a lot before. It'll probably come up, I'm sure. But I am so thrilled that you're here. We always have like the best conversations. We've gone on too many road trips to count of like 10 hours at a time. So I'm going to be watching our time very closely, but I'm going to give it to you now to intro yourself and say hi.
Oh, hello. I'm so excited to be on. I've listened to you talk and sort of be in the chair now. It's so exciting. Um, I love your podcast. I actually was talking to someone yesterday about it
Oh my God,
because
Sam.
I just hearing other people just put into words some of your thoughts sometimes, even not experts. I don't remember her name, but the swimmer from, I want to say Tennessee, from one of your episodes, just like really put so many
Yes.
things into words that I was like, oh my God. And you're just like, there it
Mhm.
is. That's the
Brianna,
feeling.
yeah.
Translate it. And so yes, Mariah said we met at rowing at Notre Dame. We became really close our sophomore year and never turned back.
Yeah.
um,
It's been a
and
journey.
yeah, I majored in computer science and Spanish, so I had a little bit of an unconventional track. I did 5 years to do two bachelor's degrees. So I stayed at Notre Dame and did not row my 5th year. I ended up bartending at a bar, which is great.
My favorite place in the world. We'll talk about it.
And I ended up becoming where all my friends could come back and visit for games, and it was amazing. And yeah, I don't know any other details you want me to dive into in the bio. I don't know.
That's perfect. Do you wanna say what you're going to be doing in this next upcoming year, or do you wanna weave that in later?
Let's just dive into it.
Okay, yay.
So like I mentioned, I majored in computer science at Notre Dame, and so I am going to be starting Monday, a software engineer at Google, on their tap post submit team, and I'm really excited about it. We're gonna have to come back on to let you know what that's gonna look more like
Yeah,
once we
can't
start.
wait. Annual
Um,
review. We'll put it in
yeah,
the calendar.
exactly. um, and yeah, so that starts in the beginning of, I guess, my career. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Well, okay. This is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and there's a bunch of different elements to it. So I'm going to kind of walk us through like the transition of us graduating like as a class, like our traditional 4 years, because you were at our graduation. Like I want that to be made clear. And then like you had the extra year where you got like a second graduation for your second bachelor degree. And so I don't know if we've ever talked about this. I feel like we probably did one of the times that I was visiting you. But we're gonna solidify it in stone on the podcast. What was it like being at Notre Dame for like the extra year when like we weren't there? I
Yeah.
know we've talked about this now that I ask it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was honestly a really humbling experience. Like first, okay, so out the gates, come back the first day. I'm like, oh my God, like I don't know anyone here.
That's
And
just not true, but continue.
yeah. But like obviously, like, yes, not true, but like the overwhelming feeling of
Yes.
like
Yeah.
so many new faces. Something that shocked me too was that and this was later on. So my things were still kind of COVID oriented my 5th year. But then especially my spring semester, I was only in two classes the way that everything shook out. I had a minor that ended up dropping. And so I wasn't on campus much because those who know Notre Dame, I was on like the most peripheral possible classrooms, like in Corbett Family Hall. I think that's the official name of it. Like the
I
classroom
think
that
you're
literally
right.
like looks out over the parking lot. And then in D-Bart, the like first classroom when you walk in the far door. So like
Yeah.
could not be more on the edge of campus. And I like had no other reason anymore because I wasn't going to practice anymore. Was kind of all my friends that I hung out with were off campus. So I never had any reason to go into campus. And then I remember, so I had a Spanish class. We all got really close. It was amazing professor. Howdy. And
Oh,
I
yes, I had him as
love,
well. Yep.
love the man. But just the nature of the classroom is like we all always got close. And so I was actually going onto campus to meet with one of our old classes. We were all getting coffee together. And I hadn't been on campus in so long at this point. And I remember texting the group chat, like, it was like, there's no way everyone here is 18 years old. I was like, it was like the first time I was like, do I look as old as I feel like everyone else is young? So that was different. But also just like, I'm not sure which aspects of coming back for my 5th year were because of feeling older, because of not rowing, being more removed without like having the same social circle. Because as you know, even though our grade was pretty big, it felt often very small. And it was your campus, you knew everyone. And so suddenly kind of being almost ghost-like feeling, walking around.
Ghost town.
And yeah, like I don't want to say like irrelevant, and because that sounds like harsh and like self-meaning or whatever, but it's not. It's just like different, you know? Like suddenly it doesn't feel like this is my campus where I'm saying hi to everyone. It's just wow, different. But it's also empowering at the same time, because it's like, wow, the next like generation, if you will, coming through. And it was cool to see firsthand as someone who had been there, even though I was still technically an undergrad, like in undergrad, grew up to feel like a home, and then to still be there, but like in such a different light. So
yeah, like you're kind of like your age and like the 5th year is typically like, oh, it's your like in grad school or something. And so even though you're technically like undergrad, it's like, oh, you're like 22, 23, feeling what it must be like to have like a younger sibling. Like you're like watching them in their element at school, and you're just like, what the heck?
What's happening?
Yeah, you're like kind of like a mentor, but like also still a part of their group. And it's just like you're on this like line between two stages of life, because like most of us, I mean, all of our close friends graduated. So there's like a couple of people who were still on campus that you saw, but that was like usually they're in grad school. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was always important for me to do the 5th year. So like I said, the track, I was always going to do 5 years at Notre Dame. And I like the coaches at one point were like, oh, you could debate your first year for eligibility. But I never did that. So it was kind of, okay, I'm always going to have this year to do other things. And then COVID hit, and suddenly I had to decide, do I want to keep rowing for a year, or do I want to have that year that I always had envisioned having? My brother and dad both also went to Notre Dame, and both won Bengal bouts, and had always talked about boxing. They both were on the rugby team, talked about their like going to tailgates, which obviously for us looked very different than other students at the school. And so all these aspects that they talked about, they were in Dillon, and I was in Farley on North Quad. So to have like such different college experiences on the same campus, part of me like yearned, I guess. Is that even the right word?
For sure. Are you kidding? Yeah. That's the perfect word.
Thank you for that 1 year. And it definitely put into perspective what we did on rowing, and how to, like, you know, when you're on a team that you're having a little bit of a different college experience, but then to experience it and be like, wow, like this is like exceeded my expectations. Like not even in like a good or bad way, but just like I swear I did all my homework, but reading all of my readings, like
any teachers listening, we were good students.
Yeah, any teachers listening. Like the same class, like Howard Gee's class, I admired him as a professor since I had him my sophomore year, and I always found it a fun class to be in. But I was finding what I needed to for the homework, and that was it. And like, you know him as a professor, that's like the bare minimum. Like if you know the answers, that's like, and I finally was like looking up other articles to read. Like reading it in, sometimes when I didn't understand it, like looking up the English versions and like reading it with the Spanish and annotating both. And like, it was just like such an amazing feeling. So like school was fun. I was like not walking into the library at 9:30 p.m. with my coffee in hand after like getting out of dinner, because I didn't want to sacrifice having dinner with my friends for that hour. Like that was a very special time for me that I wasn't willing to give up. And I remember my brother, a man of many few words, many words, I don't know, blunt to say the least. I love him for it too. At one point I talked about how little I slept while on the rowing team. And he was like, well, I don't know, that feels like self-inflicted, like you could have avoided that.
Okay.
And I was
Okay,
like,
brother.
yeah, no kidding. And he wasn't expecting it, I don't think. And I was like, no, yeah, you're right. Like, I never said it wasn't, but I was not willing to sacrifice the things that it required to not inflict that upon myself. Like,
Yeah.
if I saw a friend that I hadn't talked to in a long time, I would stop and talk to them. That was very important to me. That was not something I was willing to give up. So kind of ranted and answering that question in many directions, but I appreciated, like, I finally missed rowing. Like, I remember like January, so like it took a
That's
couple
special.
months. But like I remember turning to our other teammate, Caroline Hills, who, when people refer to her as Caroline, I'm like, who? So chills. And I was like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, like, what happens if I had rowed this year? And I kind of was telling her, I was like, shake me, please shake me. Cause like there was so many reasons, like my body could not have handled another year. I don't know if mentally I could have handled another year, but I was like, no, like I really miss it. Like I want to get back into, I miss the water. And it was kind of like a special moment where we kind of just sat and we're like, yeah, like it was like, I love that I miss it. It was such a big part of my college
Yeah.
experience that I don't want to resent
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. No, that's a lot of perspective. And
Right.
yeah, no, I don't think you've ever like articulated to me that it was the like, oh, the missing rowing part, or like the now you
Yeah.
have the college career. Because now I feel like I am it's not in college, obviously. Like I'm in the working force now. And so I see the extra time I have. Granted, it's because we don't have like homework, right? You're done at work, the typical 9 to 5. Um, but I am like the most free time speaking like that I ever have been. And so I can only imagine in undergrad what that must have felt like. And there's definitely like when you said yearn, I was like, that is exactly it. Like there's always going to be, I'm sure there's people who are like, oh, I wonder what it's like to have been an athlete in college. And on the flip side, I'm sure a ton of our athletic community would relate to being like, oh, what is it like not having, the athletic experience. And so I love
It's just
that.
so
And then
different.
yeah, like that's such a great perspective to have gained throughout that year, in addition to like actually enjoying school and like putting in the extra effort that you always want to put in if you're an
Yeah,
academic,
absolutely.
but not necessarily able to.
Yeah.
I think anyone um, who has ever enjoyed anything academic would relate to that. Sometimes, the clock just runs out. Um, and I also, something that you put your time and energy into was bartending,
Yes.
which
Oh
I
my goodness.
love. Um,
I am so happy. Like, okay, it started as a joke, honestly. Like in our group chat with our
yeah,
friends, Megan was like, apply, you won't. Because I
yeah,
was gonna work at Brothers, which is another like
hmm
sports bar in
yeah.
town. And they
Wait, did you
they
know, do
called
you know
me.
real quick, do you know Brothers is a chain? Because I didn't know
Yes,
that.
I
Okay. Oh
recently
my God.
found out. Well, not recently, but like it feels like recently because college was yesterday. But
Yeah.
um, yes. So they actually called me saying like, here is your interview time, and they just scheduled it without asking me, and so it was like I couldn't do the time that they said, and I called back, and a waitress picked up, and they needed more waitresses, but apparently there was some drama about the waitresses that already worked there didn't want more people because they wanted the hours. And
Yeah.
I called back and I was like, hi, I'm calling about an interview that was scheduled and I can't make it. I just wanted to reschedule it. I would really love to work here. And she basically, I don't even remember what she said. I just
I feel
remember
like
it was
I remember it was like very like
yeah,
don't come
yeah,
basically.
like, oh, LOL, hangs up, or like,
Yeah.
so I don't, yeah, the sentiment I remember. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, so then Megan, our friend, also a teammate, was just applied to Noose. He won't. We had gone there. It was a place that we all just loved going, bonding.
Hmm.
um, and I was like, you know what? Why not? It was on Instagram. I messaged them, and now I know Mary, who's an angel. I love her. Who owns the bar with Rick. So okay, come in on whatever day, whatever time. We're gonna do a quick interview. I was like, okay, sounds good. I didn't know who I was meeting. I didn't know. Like, I'm literally just walking up to Noofs at like 9 p.m. on a Tuesday.
So good.
um, and the door opens. It's like, oh yeah, like she's just finishing up with someone. You can like walk upstairs, acting like as if I know anyone who I'm supposed to be seeing, what I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
doing. didn't bring anything with me. I'm like, what do I wear to an interview at a bar? um,
Like a
and
club,
so we just,
honestly, like a
yeah,
low-key club.
exactly.
Yeah. It's a
Dance
dance club.
club bar.
Yeah.
um, and we just honestly hit it off right away, started talking. And then she started saying, okay, like these are the things you need to fill out, et cetera, et cetera. This is how you get your license. But she never really said I had the job. And so I was just like, okay, I don't really. Obviously everything worked out. My new fun fact whenever I go anywhere is that I have my liquor license in the state of Indiana.
I love it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it honestly just turned into my forced social time. Like
Mhm.
I obviously needed to be making some money for rent. So needed to get a job in some capacity and started like, this will be fun, kind of a meme, if you will. Like, oh, what did you do in college? Oh, I worked at our bar that we all went to.
Yeah.
And like, again, just like exceeded my expectation in every capacity. They truly just like amazing people. They became my friends, the people I like talked to. I looked forward to going to work every weekend. Um, it definitely was an interesting experience when it came to just like how I was perceived by the students, like all around. Not even Notre Dame. It was like Notre Dame, Holy Cross, Bethel,
St. Mary's.
St. Mary's. Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever other schools I'm forgetting that are in the area.
Yeah.
Because often, honestly, people would be like pretty rude, and then or like demeaning, and then be like, "Oh, like, is this your full-time job? Like, what are you like doing? Like, oh, how long have you lived in?" Like, just things. I was like,
Very
"Oh,
presumptuous or like assuming
yeah."
things. Yeah.
And I
About
didn't
like
mind
being
so
in the service
much.
industry. Yeah.
Yeah. So on. And then towards the end, they threw me a little party for my last shift.
So cute.
And everyone's like, why are you leaving? Like, what the heck? Like, did you get another job? And I was like, oh, I'm graduating. And just like the look of like, what? um, and then just like other presumptions of just assumptions, I guess, about like where I went to school, what my major might be, and like never asked, never was like, oh, what do you do? And like you have to ask the right questions sometimes to get the right answers. And maybe I
Mhm.
played a little too much of a game with it of like, let's see what they say.
Gotta
um,
entertain yourself somehow during a shift, right?
yeah. And just like very enlightening in many aspects. I truly think that I grew a lot working there and that it was as much like this is so cheesy and like forgive me, but as
I'll
much a
forgive you.
classroom as like anywhere else that I took.
Oh, you're so adorable.
Like, I don't know how to describe it. Like
No, yeah, it's working. Like, especially, did you work in the service industry before that or no? I
I
feel like you had,
I worked as like a camp counselor. I've worked at
okay.
service industry in the sense of like not service industry. I worked at a transition home for homeless
Yeah.
moms. And
Like very much
so
of service, but not like
yeah, like
literally serving people.
food
Yeah.
kitchens, which is like serving people who are coming to food soup kitchen is very different than a college bar.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so no, not in the capacity of like serving Notre Dame students. I don't think being like working at my dorms like waffle cafe count.
For like one night.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
um,
that's a dorm tradition. Oh my God.
I
Okay,
truly
yeah.
think everyone
Yeah.
should at
Well,
some
I
point.
like it, even though somewhat cheesy, right? Like it's still a classroom. I'm gonna draw a parallel here, so you're gonna have to hang with me. But like a work culture in a non-traditional sense of like you said, like you loved going to work there and you grew a lot from it. Like my current company, I feel like I still grow from the cultural aspect of it, of like, and it's a really great company because there's a lot of benefits. Like we treat everyone all of their unique qualifiers, like those are encouraged and emphasized, like bring to the table. And our CEO does a really great job of like bringing people from non-traditional, like higher education backgrounds. Um, and so I guess my question for you is like, why do you think the work culture there was so fun? Because you're about to like head into your first like
Yeah,
job after college. So like what are you hoping or like what do you know like jives really well with you in terms of like people that you're working with? Like for me it's like building that relationship and like having that communication there is what makes going to work like so fulfilling for me. So what do you think it is
yeah.
for you?
Um, I just I don't even let me. speak in rough draft, as my other brother says. It's like a phrase that him and his wife told me, and I'm
I
like,
love
I've
that.
been using it every
Rough
20
drafted
minutes of
out
this.
right now.
Isn't it so great?
It
I'm
is.
like, wow, that's another example of someone saying something, and I'm like, that is what I needed. Um, and so I think a good anecdote that kind of paints a good picture is that one of the other bartenders was she was doing bodybuilding, and she had worked for months on a show that didn't even go to the opening dinner for we had Noose at or dinner at Noose, which was just great.
So
I was like, wow, it's
exciting.
so clean in here when it's because this was like
What's that like?
before I got hired or after I got hired, but before I had worked. We went to like a barbecue there. And she like didn't go because she was in her cutting phase, being very disciplined. And a couple of days before her show, she told me it was called cellulitis, but like some sort of infection in her leg that they had to put a string in and drain it. And so she was medically disqualified from her show. And I was just like, wow, I'm so sorry. Like, I know how many months go into that training. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah,
Like,
you can like empathize, but like that's such
yeah,
a intense and
yeah.
like
Like, are you
non,
okay? Like, what do you say in that
yeah,
situation?
yeah.
Like, I just started working here. Do you want to talk about it? Like, I don't know.
Tell me
Probably
what
not
you
with me.
need.
And she was just like, you know what? Next time we just work harder. Like, I don't
Mm,
know. Like, and I think that just kind of like really emphasizes or like describes the attitude of like everyone just showed up. We had a good time. We worked. Like when someone complained, you kind of poked fun at it. Um,
very
and
Midwestern values right
just
there.
like
Like
we're all here,
show
we're
up
all
to work.
working. It's
Yeah.
cleaning after shift. I'm like, it's 5:30 in the morning. All of us want to go home, but we can still like shoot the bleep if you
Yeah. You can
I don't
curse.
know how to swear.
Shoot the bleep. Rough drafting it out. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Final cut.
Um, and so that kind of I think is what creates such a great environment. And just like that's true for anywhere, like surrounding yourself with people who have similar values as you. Like, yeah, this is kind of a crap situation. I would rather be in bed right now. You'd rather be in bed right now. But here we are scrubbing the floor of news. um,
Camaraderie.
yeah. And just like yeah, we like another aspect of it. It was very much so a team dynamic, which it's like some interesting parallel. But like I had been on sports my entire life. Like I was a walk on for rowing, and like was most certainly a part of my like not even quarter life crisis. I don't know, like identity crisis. Like oh my god, like I'm not gonna be on a team anymore. So like like remember like getting that email. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll try out for rowing. Like it'll just waste a couple weeks of my first, but I'll meet some people. And then like 4 years later,
Yeah.
but then at the bar we split tips. So like whatever it's pooled together and then split evenly.
Hmm.
Um, and I honestly like was kind of confused about that when we first started, but then quickly caught on that was the best way to do it. It just stops. There's some people who tip really well. Like it's a college bar. Honestly, most people like the amount of people who tip nothing at all is just like I would say close to 50%. Just like
Hmm.
we'll scribble through it. My favorite is when someone will like write something to make it look like they're tipping and then flip it over and it's like LOL, haha, like drunk, like just random words. And I'm like, okay, that's a lot of effort, but okay. And so all splitting tips kind of just lends to like, okay, there was one bartender who she always called me her daughter. Like people would be like, who's that bartender? And she's like, that's my daughter, so you better back.
That's
But
incredible.
she was always like, okay, let's make some money tonight. Like just whatever it takes, like all
Hmm.
of us, and just that aspect of like, she was super competitive, but she was like super competitive in the sense that she wanted everyone to be that competitive. So we all did
All
the best we could
benefited.
do.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah,
that,
like group
and there was that
mentality.
bar sports. Yeah. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's great. I feel like that's something to take with you like into the new job too, is like knowing that that work culture, it's like, okay, that the history of being on teams for like your whole life and like all benefiting from the hard work that all of you are putting in, like you're all pulling your own weight and like being able to take that, like, albeit like college bar is going to be very different from traditional workforce. But there's still a lot of hard work and value that goes into any job that you're working. Um, even with the funny stories, like there's so many tidbits of good information that I know throughout the year while you were there, like we're sharing with us, and just like the respect that maybe gets lost in different environments, different like restaurants, service, people that are serviced and intoxicated. So I think it's a great thing just to emphasize, like hearing from a bartender is like, hopefully someone hears this and is like, oh, you know what, if I was ever that person that like scribbled on the back of a like receipt and didn't give a tip, hopefully then we can change that just a little bit. And I think and I think one of the things that lends itself nicely to is talking about kind of like where we get our worth from, and like being like such a workhorse. And so that was one thing for me, like transitioning away from athletics. I was like, oh my God, so I need something to pour all my energy into that used to be rowing, because I'm not going back to rowing, at least not anytime soon. All your energy into yeah, I was like, from like we'd finish classes around 3 and then go to practice until 6:30-ish, 7-ish. So it was like all of that time and energy, like where am I putting it into? And thank God I found the Orr Fellowship and some other, other nonprofits that I volunteer with, and this podcast. And so like I've split my time and energy into those more equally, I guess, than like it used to be, like pretty much all eggs in one basket with rowing. But that also, like transitioning away from sport, I was like, oh boy, that's a lot of things that I knew I had to unravel, of like, if I am not working out, that I am not having a good day and I'm not doing well. And then it translates into like, I am a piece of shit because I'm not being active and like pouring my time and energy into other places. And I know we've talked about relating to that of like, where do you pull that worth from? And so like now, because you had like you had that transition away from rowing, but it wasn't into the workforce quite yet. It was still like attached to school.
Half step. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Which I think is like, at least in my opinion, that's hopefully a better way to do it, because you still like have some footing and you still understand like, oh, I'm going to be going to classes. It's like what we've always done. You have that education piece, and it's, I think, a smoother transition. So like, would you say like you felt that?
Yeah, no, I have a couple comments on a lot of the good things you just said. One, kind of coming full circle, the comment actually that I was referring to about that Brianna made it was something along the lines of, she was always so hard on herself and so competitive, and thought that it was when sports ended that would stop. And she was actually like, no, the outlet's just gone. So now I just am hard on myself in general. And I was like, that is it.
That's the one. It resonates.
Exactly. And so it was just like, just as a listener, I was like, I am heard. Like,
I'm so glad that validates me so much. Thank you.
That kind of flows into a lot of what you said. And like the next thing of transitioning out of sports and finding all these other things to do, where like, how can you channel that? And like, you kind of said, oh, if I don't work out, I feel like a piece of shit. And then, and that's like, takes a certain level of honesty with yourself to acknowledge, like, what are the things that I'm not good at? Me, if I am hungry, I turn into a horrible human being. Like, genuinely, like, it's my boyfriend Joey and I have to joke about it, because I will just,
it's too real,
be fuming for no reason. Like, I just turn into myself and am in the worst mood. And he'll be like, okay, like maybe we just go get something.
I have an idea. We go eat food and then we'll talk about it.
Literally call it the hangry monster. And it's like kind of a joke. There's a book I read, it's called, I think it was in Mindset, where you like give a name to your fixed, it's definitely mindset. Yeah. You give a name to your fixed mindset persona. So when they come out, I don't know, like Paul, let's just name like I've never named mine, but like personifying, maybe the hangry monster is my personified.
Now it's Paul.
Now it's Paul. I've named it and there's no going back.
Yeah.
And just like saying like, yeah, wow, like I feel Paul coming out, the hangry monster's out to play. It kind of like allows you to laugh at yourself enough to acknowledge where growth. That's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about too, where it's like there's growing is almost trendy these days. And this will circle back to answering the question too, I swear.
Yes, do it. Take us on a trip. Go for it.
Yeah, all the way around. I feel like growing has become such a trendy social media thing that, and a lot of people are influencers who that is their full-time job, to journal and make it look nice and make their lists of things, and good for them. Like I am sending so much love and good energy to the people who can stop mid meditation and record themselves doing it, because I cannot. Like when I'm eating my breakfast, it's gone before the thought of taking a picture of it even crosses my mind.
Yeah. Phone does not eat first around,
no, phone does
around
not.
us. We're hungry monsters.
I think that's something that I really struggled with in bringing, I know we wanted to talk about this, but like my original post for Learn to Listen of like complaining enough so that people don't think you're perfect and that you are like trying and caring, but not too much that like you actually are having a hard time.
Yeah, that it's like real, like you're like in the trenches.
Exactly. And like I know it's talked about, but there's so many people online who are like, yeah, I'm really working on myself because I just like love people too much, or I just like work too hard. I just have to make everything so perfect. And it's like those are real problems that people have to work on, but the way they're worded, it's almost like a little safety gear that gets clicked into place when people talk about their problems of like, okay, I'm going to acknowledge it, but I'm going to throw some glitter on it.
Like sugarcoat it.
Plated to the world instead of like, this is my heap of trash that I have for me. And like, it's a real thing of like, going through college, like there were certain aspects of like my friends from high school, literally we rip on each other. Like if someone did something embarrassing, you will not hear the end of it until the day we die.
Yeah.
I will still hear about the crap I pulled my freshman year of high school regularly. I could set a timer if 30 minutes have passed and we all get together and something hasn't been brought up. I'm like, what's going on? Is something wrong? Like, are you guys okay?
Are you guys off? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and I used to get really defensive about it. I would get so upset, like, and not even outwardly, like I wouldn't even say anything. I would just like come up with excuses for myself. Like, well, yeah, like, but I wasn't that bad, or like, blah, blah, and like kind of like change my entire air, like not laugh it off. I was like, they're laughing at me. They were not laughing with me. And they were 1,000% laughing with me. I was just being a brat about it, you know?
That's self-awareness. We love it.
Yeah, exactly. And then realizing the degree to which like throwing glitter on your issues only hurts you. You know what I mean? Like when I'm like, I could come up with 1,000 things that I need to work on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like I get stressed sometimes when I relax. Like, and that's like wording it that way is something like, oh, you can't relax, like, and it's like, no, I literally like cannot sit still and will burn an entire day doing nothing. And literally just like twiddling my thumbs of like, oh, I'm gonna do something, oh, I'm not, and like, no, just take the time to fully not do something. Like, oh, I'm committing to not doing anything today, instead of like, I'm gonna read at the beach. Like, no, why would I do read
like half in, half out?
Yeah. Or I'm trying to think, in high school, this is like, we're talking like girl talk, boy talk now.
I love it.
Would like seek attention for like the stupidest things. Like, and as I got older, I would see other people do it and I'm like, wow, that's like not a great color. I need to fix my own thing. You know what I mean? And really just diving in to like your issues and not putting that glitter on it. Suddenly I'm the one cracking the jokes first with my high school friends because like it is funny.
Like, you can't get me, huh? No.
Yeah. And like that's like, what's the shame in who you were before you grew? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
I sometimes I'm like, wow, I wish I could just like erase everyone's memory of me my like sophomore year of college. That'd be great. Like, if I could just take a little like magic, Mr. Magic, whatever, what's that thing? Magic eraser, and just like scribble out those
Yeah.
pieces. Um, and like when people poke fun at it, I'd get defensive and like be all upset. And like there's no need.
Hmm.
Let's just like talk about it, because walking away from that is like a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I
That's a
love
really
how
rough.
you phrase that. No, 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 I got you. Like how
Yeah.
you phrase that in there's no like there shouldn't be shame in who you were before you grew because like that's how you got to where you are now.
Yeah.
And so like and I love like the hangry monster Paul, right? Like the personification of the person. We're gonna bring it back. Like it kind of allows you to poke fun and also like tell your partner what's like going on and be like, okay, like with Joey, right? Like you're telling him like I like it's coming out to play. Like you're probably not gonna get much patience from me right now because
Mhm.
I'm like in this state and feeling this. And so it kind
And
of
I
like
will be irrational.
yes. Yeah. And you're kind of like, yes, you can poke fun at yourself for it, whatever. But I think there's like an added level of knowing yourself so well that you know like what you need in a moment or like what your needs are right then. And so I love that you brought that up, one, and then gave like a bunch of different examples of like going in from like the trendiness of growing and all our exposure in social media to like all these like daily routines, like all of the perfect, like, I don't even know, like TikTok or like influencer, like micro influencer, where it's like they're perfectly set up, like
Like their desk
work
with like
spot. Yes,
monitors and
exactly.
glowy
Yeah.
keyboards, and they're like, I'm a real software engineer. And I'm like, I use my Mac and like my one keyboard that I have.
Yeah. And it's like, I see those things and I'm like, oh, that, like, that's great for them that they've
Yeah,
figured that out. Like, exactly like you said, like, not hating on that at all. But it's, I know that if I tried to get to that level of like the people that I'm seeing and consuming, it's not realistic for me. And then it like
it would
sends
stress
me
me
into a
out more.
spiral.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm like, okay, well, I can't realistically like set these daily habits for myself because they're not what I need. Like,
Yeah.
that's just what we're being shown or like it's trendy right now,
Absolutely.
whatever. um and I actually it's going to be the episode before ours is released, so it fits well and it's timely. But I was speaking with Allison and she's a clinical therapist, and so we were talking about how like there's so many resources around like vulnerability and self-help right now, which is great. But then what happens is like I think we consume that, but then the actual application piece of like going to therapy is where we fall off. And so it's like exactly this kind of like same realm of like trendiness and self-help. Like I think it's starting the conversation. There's more awareness, there's more visibility into all these different things that you could be doing, but then it can get stressful sometimes because when you don't feel like a shift in the behavior just because you're like acknowledging or reading about something, that's when you're like, oh God, now I've done like the work. And you're kind of like, it's a placebo effect. You're like telling yourself, I've done the work, I've done like the reading, I've done the education part, but it isn't the experience that like matches that. And it's the same thing with
Yeah.
like racial understanding, like DEI work. It's like if you read it but don't apply it, like that's where the disconnect happens. And so like when you said the like trendiness of growing, it can be like intimidating because there's so many things out there, but we're not matching our needs or like not practicing what we're seeing. I totally relate to that.
Yeah. And so to bring it back to the original question, which I told you I was about to take you on a journey there.
I know I had to dive
Um,
in with the journey with you
yeah.
too.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would have wanted nothing else. The fifth year ended up being, so I did 75 hard with my roommate and my boyfriend. And it was a great bonding experience. Like her and I got super close, just kind of through like, wow, did you do your second workout today? Like,
Oh.
and I actually recently was talking to someone about it here. I just moved out to West Hollywood, and they were like, oh, so did you have a goal? Like, what's your goal weight? Like, what was your like macros and all this stuff? And I was like, actually, I took it kind of as the opposite. Like 75, yes, there's all these like fitness trendy goal. I keep using the word trendy, but goal things online of like either have this super aesthetic food with like, oh, just quickly whip up these brownies that have like $20 worth of cashews and dates in them, and it's great. And I'm like, I hate grocery shopping. I don't want to go get these things. Like, I don't have like condensed 1% milk just like
Lying
chilling in my
around.
cupboard.
Yeah.
um, but that, yeah, besides the point. And I was like, no, actually, like I did 75 hard to transition out of rowing. Like I am definitely stubborn when it comes to just like changing my habits. And when it comes to working out, I was at a stage in my life. I think this was my summer going into junior year. So this is still mid rowing. And I kind of realized something was wrong in this moment of I went to an hour-long workout class, like body pump, super fun. If no one's tried it, they should. It's great. And it's a pretty hard class if you make it. You have a bar that you're putting weights on and off, and it's really intense weightlifting. And then I remember afterwards, I went and ran pretty hard for 40 minutes. And then I remember stopping the treadmill because I had to go and eat dinner with the family this is when I was working at the transition home. So I was staying with another family. And I remember being so upset with myself that I didn't run for more than 40 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
just like guilty, stressed. Like, there was never a day that went by during rowing that I wasn't like wasting energy on how high my heart rate was because of how anxious of the fact that I didn't work out more that day.
Yeah.
Like, I dove so badly into not allowing myself to eat pleasure foods that like I, with a lot of other factors going into my junior year, like my health just deteriorated so quickly. And it was because I couldn't shake just like not doing everything perfectly. Quote, you can't obviously see my air quotes there.
Air quotes, yeah.
Air quotes perfectly to like not have any excuses as to why I wasn't at my best. And part of that was because I like lost the fun. Like my freshman year, I like was a walk-on, so rowing was new and great and fun, and everything was a PR because I'd never done it before. And like looking back, I was like, wow, I did like really good on my first 2K ever. Like no wonder the coaches had some faith in me because I was like, at the time I was like, wow, that's so kind of them. Like I like am new and they're like putting me in boats. And I was like, because I did a good job. Like,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what the number was, and I just like was happy to be there.
Like
And then
ignorance is bliss at that point. You're
yeah,
like,
and
sure.
then sophomore year was probably my best year on the team, and it was because the same thing. Like now I knew what I was doing, and it was still fun. Um, and then the summer after my sophomore year, I was focusing more on like social work and doing these things and like still trying to work out, but like I wasn't home. I was like at a new gym, like all these things, and like still stressing about it. But now I'd come off of this high of my sophomore year season and it wasn't fun anymore. I was like, I can't go lower. Like I can't I need to be better. And like instead of continuing to do the same things and like work and try to inch as I had been, because that's what you do when you start something new. You're like, I just want to be a little better every time. Suddenly it was, I need to make jumps. Like I need to be that much better. So suddenly I was flying and dying on pieces, something I'd never done before.
Yeah. Flying and dying,
and so,
for people who don't know, rowing too is like you go too fast out of the gate. So it's like you're like sprinting in the beginning and then you're just like absolutely gassed at the end of it.
absolutely.
Just yeah.
And like my heart rate was so high when I started that like I like would feel it like like in my chest. And so like it took the fun away. And so basically that kind of like, I wish I read that mindset book sooner, because I like was reading it and remember being like, wow, like how would my career have changed if I had read this sooner and just been okay with coming back slowly from like I had back injury and was out for a while. And I got injured because I was lifting more than I should have because I
You're
was
trying to make
frustrated.
jumps.
Yeah, like I was frustrated that I wasn't where I had been. So I was just like, no, I'm going to put on the exact same weight that I lifted when I was 100% healthy and it's going to be fine. It wasn't fine. My coach had to come up to me and be like, Sam, it's not happening today, when I was about to start a piece, and literally would like convulse over every couple of strokes because my back was like spazzing.
Giving out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is one of the moments where I was like, I need to play the game, I guess, like dive headfirst into it. If I can't break these habits, I'm going to make a very regimented way of being less regimented, which sounds ironic, but that was what 75 hard was for me. And that my fifth year allowed me to do that. And that I'm going to do yoga for one of my workouts. I'm going to go on a walk. Like I enjoy walks. Crazy concept. Like be not sedentary without like dying.
Dying. Yeah.
It was a new concept to me, earth shattering. If you
Yeah. No, say like we literally
yeah.
talked about this, like same. And like I will say sometimes to like or fellows or people currently in my life, I'm like, oh, I didn't get like a 90-minute workout in. Oh my God, like that I'm
Yeah.
stressed. And then like, what are you like talking about?
Yeah.
I'm like,
And they laugh, right? They're like, oh my
yeah.
God, you're so ridiculous. And I'm like, and then I'm like, stress.
Yeah. And I'm like, I know it comes from a bad place. Like I know, and I'm trying to like unwind that. So like knowing that backstory with 75 hard of like you need to be so regimented so you get out of the like a workout has to be grueling 90 minutes or like however long like
Well, because they said it's 45-minute workouts twice a day. And so I was like, I
yeah
will not work out for more than 45 minutes. I
yeah
will go. I had weights in my garage. I'm only gonna do 3 lifts and my lift. Crazy.
crazy
Just to
yeah
move. I'm gonna warm up, and that's gonna be 10 minutes of the 45-minute workout, and that will be okay.
yeah
Um, and so that's kind of like the ugly side of it. Like, oh my gosh, I work out too much. Haha. No, like it was bad. Like
mm-hmm.
I would not
Destructive for
enjoy
sure
life because yeah, like you go out to eat with your friends and like I like didn't drink my entire senior year because of my back and like other injuries. And I was like, I cannot give any excuse as to why, like, I cannot give anyone any reason to say that I'm not trying my hardest to get back. But it was to such a point that I was just like, I think more so my junior year, so mentally unwell. And you talked about this in one of your podcasts too, that like, oh, like this idea that like for your mental health to get better, your performance has to get worse. And that's just like so not true. And like
yeah
diving, I think part of it was like the like schedules we were given was like, oh, if it's not working, doing more of the same thing. And that's so not true. Like a silly example was I ran a marathon actually 2 weeks ago, which was one of my goals. And I was like, well, I'm in good shape now. Might as well like get it done out of the way. It was
check
actually
that off
so
the
fun.
list yeah
Yeah. It was so fun. But going into it, I was like, the thing I'm most worried about is the impact. Like my feet, my knees, my hips. Like I haven't been working out like this, obviously, because the 70 part I had gotten
yeah
down and worked my way back up. And I was like, I'm gonna do it right. And such a little thing was that I moved my pinky toe on its own for the first time in my life. And like let's like all laugh about it for a minute.
yeah
But like I thought genetically I could not do that because I had never been able to my entire life.
I just wiggled my pinky toes. I was like, wait a
Yeah.
minute. I was like, now I have to think about it.
And I literally just doing like little exercises that took 5 minutes out of my day every day. I could now do like I wasn't even trying. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to like keep my feet like strengthen my feet and make sure I didn't get shin splints, which was a really big problem for me in high school. And I was like, wow, like more is not always the
Better.
solution. And I think that was something that was kind of beaten into our brains for a little bit. Like, just do more. And that is how you succeed.
Yeah.
And I
Like
was
more
like,
time,
wow,
more energy, more reps. Like,
yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, like I took it back 95% and was able to do this thing just because I was now using the right tools that I'd never asked anyone for,
Yeah. And
you
that
know?
too, yes. And that too is like the fortunate part of the value that rest gives
Mm-hmm.
and how that like correlates to your mental health of being like, oh, like I can rest and it's okay. And it goes back to what you said of like, I feel like I'm like because of athletics, it's like my productivity intrinsically like it correlates to self-worth. And so it's like if I'm not being productive, and productivity usually means like movement, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, bettering myself. And so like it goes back to that what you said earlier of being stressed when you're resting. Like it is a hard habit to break of being like, oh, I'm not like go, 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 go until I'm like crashing in bed until at like
Really
11, right?
throwing
Or like,
quality out the window for quantity.
yes, yeah, exactly. So I'm happy that like now we're able to at least be reflective and be like, oh, that wasn't a good habit that we had, or like what we were being like so stubborn about, or like that was so ingrained in our brains about being like more is better is not the case. And now like we're more experienced. We are a little bit away from those habits. Like we're able to grow on them. That's what I think, like, that's where that growth happens. And that's what we had talked about earlier of growth not necessarily like, you don't have to be ashamed of the person that you were before you had that growth, right? Because it got you to where we are today. And I think that's a big part of both of our lives of like, oh, did we do shit that I was like, why did we do that? Or like, why did I feel like that? But there's no use to doing that. Like, you're only damaging yourself. You're only making yourself feel worse for something that's already happened. So like, grow and move on from it. And I know that's why I've always valued like your opinions, because obviously like teammates, we were with each other like 24/7. And so like being able to bounce ideas off of each other, like just like confide in each other was like, I can say for absolute certainty, the only thing that got me like through athletics to this point, through school, like through any personal relationships that were not going well, is like that dependability on other people to like tell you, be like, you're not crazy, you're not sane, like this is just an emotion you're feeling, and how do we get you feeling better?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, yeah. And the type of, you said dependability, but even, I don't know what the right word for it. So help me out if it comes to mind. But
Run
like,
it by me, rough draft it.
yeah, exactly. Like sometimes you're not okay, and it doesn't help when people are like, no, you're doing great, keep it up. Like, I'm like, no, I don't want to keep it up because this up is not good. I like I remember distinctly times I had lost like 20 pounds in 3 weeks because various reasons. And I remember one of our coaches coming up to me and being like, you're doing great. It's not going to be the same, but you're doing great. And like, I appreciated so much the sentiment, but I was not doing great. You
Yeah.
know,
Well,
like,
it invalidates what you're going through and like how you're
yeah,
feeling. So it should
yeah,
have been like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Rather than like projecting what they wanted you to be
yeah. And I
onto you.
remember going on a run with Mar, and Mar and
One
I,
of our other best friends and teammates.
yes, one of our teammates, yeah. And Mar and I were running buddies for the longest time, like sophomore, junior year. Like we were in step with each other. It was so fun. And then like suddenly I like couldn't keep up with her anymore. Like very quickly, I was like, I can't. Like this, and it was so frustrating because this was something we bonded over. And part of me was like, oh my gosh, she's like not gonna. This is so silly, but like she's not gonna like want to be friends with me anymore because I can't keep up with her running. And it was like the silliest thing. And it's exactly what you said earlier, like finding your worth from your performance. And I was like, I was respected, quote, because I was able to row and like do these things. And like suddenly I can't anymore. And the same coach, to their credit, had said, like, I was like, I'm just so frustrated because I'm telling my body to do something and it's not listening to me. And like, the rowers will understand and the non-rowers might not, but when you're rowing, there's like, you're looking at the screen, like there's a number in front of you. And this, yeah, you're looking at your split, which down is faster, up is slower. And I remember so distinctly on one piece, my legs had given out. I was like having issues, whatever, during a bad stretch. And I remember like, okay, brain, like we're going now. Like this number's about to go down. Like time to push. And just like watching it like creep up.
Yeah.
And I'm
And it
like,
does the
no,
exact
wrong
opposite.
way.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Stop
I'm like,
it. Yeah.
no, it's going the wrong way. And like mentally, I was like, no, like I'm ready, like I want, like I'm ready to feel the pain. Like I'm like, it's such a weird feeling to like have your physical body give out before your mental body, because like to get to that point, like a lot of us can agree that like mentally pushing ourselves wasn't the issue. Um, like yeah, sometimes, but like we know how to push through that. And like to see the number go up anyways, I was like, what is, like I just remember feeling so defeated and then like crying at practice about it, which
Oh yeah.
a lot of tears were shed in that room. And finally, I was like, not having a little bit of a temper tantrum after the fact, just like, I don't know what to do. Like, my body's not listening to me. And one of our coaches was like, I think it's listening to you. I think you're not listening to it anymore. Like, it's telling you something and you're not listening. And just like, suddenly it was like quiet and just didn't even know how to respond. And it was like, oh, like, okay. And just being like, you're going to not come to practice tomorrow and you're going to think about it and maybe spend some more time listening, which we could all like.
Which to their credit, like that was needed. So
Yeah.
good for observing that with you.
And I can't be asked. Like every time a trainer was like, "Do you think you can practice it?" I was like, "Yep, good to go." Was not good to go. Like, um, and so I don't even remember where this came from, but like that being a huge part of it, like that defeat of like, oh, the worth, yeah, with like, there's so much more to you than like this thing, and like again, the more is not good. Like
Yeah.
I wish I could just go back and shake myself and be like, just do something and then do a little better the next day. That baseline is not going to be what it was, and that's fine.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the mind body connectedness too of
yeah.
like trusting yourself and like maybe it's because we're more mature now. Who's maybe people wouldn't say we're more
Ooh.
mature, but I'm willing to bet that we are. Age means maturity, right? No, the
The
like the
trajectory from before to now is keeping going. We're going to be
yeah,
doing
right. I think
great.
we're doing pretty well. No, like the mind body connectedness is like a big part of something that I've had to force myself to appreciate and listen to now, and I know you have as well. And so I think like anyone who's been in that state where like your body and your mind are not agreeing for like anything. It doesn't have to be in athletics or injury. Like it could literally just be like, oh, you're feeling a ton of emotions and like you don't exactly know why. Or like you're really stressed or you're really anxious or you're really happy and you're like, what is going on? Like hopefully you're happy, right? But like
Yeah.
you might not be able to pinpoint it in the moment of like, what is that feeling? It's just like trying to best navigate where you're at in the moment and like how to get you to where you want to go. Um, I think that's where that understanding comes into play because it's never going to be like completely 100% like foolproof, right? Like that's just how it is. But I know like with both of us, however, if it's 75 hard or working in the workforce now, we're like still bettering ourselves without having to sacrifice other things. And I think that's where that beautiful part comes into play and like being more vulnerable now and being able to like look back at college, look back at high school, who we were before, because that's the majority of our life, like at this point at 23, and be like, okay, that wasn't okay. That was great. And learn from it and move on. And I think that vulnerability aspect, now that I just look at us both sitting here, I'm like, if you had asked us to do this sophomore, junior year of college, oh, we would have been silent on this call because it was so difficult to open up and be vulnerable. And so I'm just so happy now, like hearing you always, but hearing you now, like speak through all of your experiences and still come out like smiling and better on the other side is very special for me.
Yeah. No, it's a just special like in general to like reflect and be like, wow, like with also the people who like helped us get here. Like we've been through a lot together, like
Yeah.
good, bad, ugly, sweat, tears,
Yeah.
nausea.
Yeah. Blood, like all the bodily fluids,
Yeah.
probably.
And
Yeah.
like I think it reminds me of my other thing where I was like talking about running with Mar, and she kind of just looked at me and was like, something's not right. Like,
Yeah.
and Mar, like she's like, I don't want to say a woman of few words, but like one of the bubbliest, just like always down for whatever, like kind of just like going through life like on a high. And like whenever she like kind of gets serious about anything, you're kind of like, okay, like she means business. Like what on the water when she was angry, or like for her, like she's only like tunes in when it's like really important. Like
Yeah.
she'll be light and optimistic when you can be, like when there's space for it. But for her to turn and be like, what's going on? I was like, because she's the first
Something's
person to
up.
say like, let's push through, like you got it, like, and she was in the beginning. And like in the past, like we would do it to each other. We'd be like, okay, like let's see if we can get to that like I don't know, like he'll like
Yeah.
square.
Motivate each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was great, and it was something that like just like we would be doing it with a smile on our face, like dying, and it'd be so fun. And for her to like, and I think a lot of us have come to those points, like especially going through like our darker times, where it's like, what's going on? And
Hmm.
for a friend to sit you down and kind of be like, okay, like something is not right here. you're like you know you've surrounded yourself with good people, and like kind of that special moment you were saying where you're like, wow, like I've gotten here, not it's not by any means because of just myself. Like I would don't want to know who I would be today without the support of
Oh,
every person.
completely different. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yeah. I know. And with that, like I appreciate you so much. Like not only just to have you as a friend, and former teammate, but just to come on this podcast. Like you're such a huge supporter of me in general too, which I always love you forever for. I know we've been chatting for a while, so I'm going to wrap this up because
I was
we'll
gonna say,
just
I was
keep
looking at the time like,
talking.
ooh.
Yeah, we'll just keep talking no matter what. But truly, like you from the very, very bottom of my heart, thank you for always making the time for me in general, but today especially for the podcast.
Oh, of course, love. It was my honor.
Yay. I love. Mwah.
Bye.